We have a number of panelists from different organizations. So I'm going to, myself, I am Diane Crosby. I work for Management and Training Corporation. I'm a business development director. And I'd like the panelists to go down the table and introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon. I'm Amy Mina, and I work with Save the Children as the program director for the Youth in Action program in Africa.
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Mabonga. I work with Restless Development in Uganda as a program officer.
Hello, my name is Jean Manny. I'm the U.S. country representative for Restless Development.
Jill Elkins. I'm the Director of International Workforce Development for Management and Training Corporation.
Good afternoon, Marty Kennison. I'm with Management and Training Corporation. I'm the Director of Career and Technical Education, and I work primarily in the program development, training, and support area.
So just generally, the format of our presentation today will be 3 short presentations of about 20 minutes each, where we'll give you an overview of some of the concepts of how we as organizations have engaged employers in workforce development programs in the field. Following that, we want to have an opportunity to have your experiences brought to the discussion as well. So there'll be about a 30-minute discussion at the very end, probably table small group, where we'll pose 3 or 4 questions to you, and you can talk amongst yourselves and talk about what your benefits have been in this environment, and then bring it forward to kind of a wrap-up. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into some of the content, and this will be presented by Amy of Save the Children.
Thanks, Diane. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I don't like using mics, but I think they need them for the filming. Okay, so this presentation will talk about one very specific part of the Youth in Action program where we've engaged employers. The program is a 5-year program in 5 countries, Burkina Faso, Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Malawi. And at the very start of the program, we did a market assessment that was done with Dalberg Global. They should have been here today. Unfortunately, they couldn't participate. They did the assessment, a market assessment in all 5 countries, in which they engaged youth, employers, as well as looking at the dynamics of the market. And that assessment is informing the program. So we wanted to share with you some findings and lessons learned about how to engage youth and how to engage employers. The assessment, as I said, was done in the 5 countries. Its purpose was really to look at what are the viable agricultural activities that youth can be involved in. And here we're talking about a very vulnerable age of about 15 to 18-year-olds, which is traditionally, we are often talking about an older age group for youth. So we had to also look at the legal context for that. The assessment also asked what skills employers require from young people. And here we're really looking at employers who are out in very rural, remote areas of the 5 countries. And the third question that we asked was, what are the challenges that young people face in accessing different sectors in the agricultural area, as well as what are the opportunities they might have and what are their interests? The scope, as I said, was 5 countries. In the assessment itself, engaged more than 2,000 young people. You'll see that just a little less than 50% were girls. It interviewed 320 businesses and employers, and we're still in the process of kind of identifying, categorizing the different business sectors in agriculture, in between family businesses, all the way to agribusinesses, to government-led businesses, to cooperative type of businesses. What are the businesses that are out there that could absorb youth? And it also looked at a commodity and service analysis to look at what part of the value chain young people could be involved in viably, with a set of very clear criteria around viability. I see a lot of people writing. We're very happy to share it with you, so don't feel compelled to write all the pieces down, okay? So this is just some photos from the market assessments. It was a lot of people involved, and as you can imagine, a market assessment being done in 5 countries with the same scope over a short period of time generates a lot of data. Actually, the reports are about to be finalized. They're about 100 pages each for each country, and there's also a synthesis report which should be ready within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So if you are interested, we're happy to share those. The way we plan to use this, and we're actually already in the process of using the information, the program has 3 components. We're selecting young people, I'd say 4, selecting young people. They're participating in a learning stream about 5 to 6 months where they're learning both hard skills and soft skills. And then they're going into a period of incubation where they are either doing business development, a small enterprise, joining a job, doing an apprenticeship, doing vocational training. So the market assessment is designed to actually inform all of those streams. In terms of the curriculum, it has helped us to identify the specific skills that we should be focusing on in the curriculum based on what employers told us. It is also helping us use the criteria that were used for assessing market viability, for developing tools for young people themselves to do very localized market assessments. It has helped us to identify, as we said, quite a number of employers and to start developing those relationships with them so that young people coming out of the program can also be linked to those employment opportunities. In terms of the livelihoods or the incubator approach, it is helping us to, again, identify the employers with growth opportunities. It is helping us to design and develop a very specific technical support process for the young people who might be entering, for example, mango processing, or whether it is focus on poultry, so we know which subsectors are very viable. It's helping us to identify finance opportunities, and that's a very big challenge because legally, for most of these young kids under the age of 18, they may not have access to finance. So we're looking at that through the market assessment and future work as well, and helping us to prepare some policy or advocacy points that might improve services for young people where there were gaps identified. So just the findings around employment, I think not a big surprise if you've gone to most of the sessions. Small business development will be the driver. There aren't really a lot of opportunities for young people in employment, formal employment, in rural areas, and particularly young people who are out of school and who are at this very young and vulnerable age group. In terms of employability skills that employers themselves identified, probably also not super surprisingly in the work I've done elsewhere, employers have often said we are prepared to do the technical and vocational and very specific job training. We want a young person to come who is honest, reliable, has some good communication skills, can resolve a conflict or at least work within a team in a very positive way, is committed, sticks with the job, uses the investment we make in them to actually, invest back in the company, is responsible, and can do some basic maths. And a lot of that is now integrated into the learning curriculum, which also includes a literacy component, a financial literacy component, and a numeracy component. In terms of viable production, we found that crop and fruit production is a possibility, but it is challenging because of the land access issues. There are some opportunities for young people to take technical skills and use them to improve family or other communal work that is being done, but the chances that young people are going to get big tracts of land or adequate tracts of land to actually start up new crop production are not that great. On the other hand, there was viable potential in small animal husbandry, and that differed by country and by location within country, which type of animals and which type of poultry. Vegetable gardening, processing and value addition, and that, I think there's a lot more scope for us to look at the processing and value addition. And what we're doing is giving young people themselves the opportunity to do a lot more of the in-depth assessments around what could be viable. Because we are talking about 5 countries, we're talking about a reach of about 44,000 young people. And we all know that young people are both creative and they like to try to experiment for themselves, better convinced if they've come up with the idea. So we're starting with a big framework from that point, but we're asking young people, we're challenging young people to go find the details of what it is in value addition that they want to do that's relevant and viable in their area. Sorry, back just a second. We also found that there was scope for young people to be involved in agricultural technological improvement, especially around irrigation, support services, and in retail as well. So we were looking at production, value addition, and retail. And we looked at what we, Dalberg asked, what are young people interested in? And for the most part, we found that they were interested in a lot of what we found was viable and less interested in crop production itself. Often they have seen their own family doing subsistence cropping, and they didn't necessarily see that that was very viable or that that improved their families' lives. So there is that kind of resistance. That doesn't mean that there isn't crop production that is viable, but given the lack of interest, given the land constraints, given the input constraints, we felt that that's probably not an area where we will focus as much. We also found that young people had fairly limited knowledge of processing opportunities and needed some support to be able to look at market-driven decision-making. In terms of girls and boys, you will have noticed that the number of girls who participated was less than the number of boys. That's probably unsurprising. In my experience of doing youth programming, that's often how it starts, and then after a while you have more girls than boys, and you have to go looking for the boys, and usually the commitment and the longer term sort of results are a lot girl-driven. But some of the factors in that were that you're talking about a very young age group. In fact, the program reaches 12 to 18-year-olds, not only 15 to 18-year-olds. So the assessment was also with 12 to 18-year-olds, and it was very hard to get very much the younger age group of girls involved. Parents are a little bit skeptical to start with. One of the key takeaways that we all know, and I'm sure you could tell us more about, is that you really need to do a lot more community mobilization and build parental trust before you work with that age group. And obviously with an assessment, you're going in a little bit colder. So that was one of the things. One of the other pieces that's very important is that parental views on what girls and boys can and should do are very important, particularly at this age group. And so we're including parents at a lot of different stages in the program implementation process. A few lessons learned. One of the things that I think we all learned a little bit halfway through the process is that we had to be really clear about what we mean by viability. And it took quite a while to develop a set of criteria on what is viable and not what is viable just for the market. When you're talking about a very young age group, how do you balance that viability with legal context, with the protection of children from hazard, because we are talking children legally. How do you balance that with access to finance? How do you balance that with young people's desire to have a fast cash turnaround? Because if something's viable in 5 years' time, I doubt that a 15-year-old is going to invest in it today. They probably need something today, and then they can build something a little longer term alongside it. So not only just looking at market viability, but looking at applicable market viability for that age group. I think that was a real key lesson learned, including employers from a very, very early stage, and looking at what we would say, who employers are. And I honestly can't give you a full-fledged answer to that yet. We are still analyzing some of that data and looking at its relevance in each context. to say who are employers, and then what are the risks of working with certain employers in this sector with this age group. It's not just who's any employer, but if the employer is the family, is that employer providing financial return or any other asset return to the young people? How do you ensure the protection of the young people in that employer context? So engaging employers and also asking who are the employers and what are their practices and how do you improve that? Another would be considering the full breadth and length of the value chain actions for young people. I've said several times about the age group. I don't think I'll repeat that again, and engaging parents from an early stage. That's where we're at, and I just wanted to share with you, Emma Siganalo and Shukran and Zikomo from Malawi and everybody else. And merci bien. Thank you.
Great. We'll take some questions at the end, and I think Restless Development is next.
Great. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on a few strategies we've been using for assessing and meeting recruitment and training needs. So Restless Development has been engaging with employers and especially the private sector a bit more strategically for a number of reasons. Don't really need to talk to this conference about the statistics, but you have them there. So what we're trying to do is engage with employers and the private sector to have them see this as a win-win situation about the potential for the workforce within Africa and the potential for it being a dual benefit both for employers and young people. Another reason is knowing that we have this talent pool of young people that we've developed through our volunteer development professional model. So we recruit and train young people to lead development programs in the countries where we work. We've seen that young people have the potential to fill workforce gaps within companies and organizations. We also have, through our work, have a broader understanding and access to the local workforce beyond just our alumni. And are being a lot more strategic about how we're supporting these former volunteers to go on into careers and use the skills and experience they've gained through their work with us. So we're creating a generation of leadership through that. And we're also drawing on our kind of nearly 30 years of experience of recruiting, training, placing, and supporting young people to lead and contribute to development while also gaining skills and knowledge for careers. So we've been working with a private sector advisory group to look at what are some of the needs that we think employers who are either national companies in sub-Saharan Africa or have a multinational companies with an interest in these emerging markets. What are some of the workforce development needs that they're facing, and what potential services might Restless Development be able to provide? And so we've been testing these potential suite of services around recruitment, onboarding, and employee development in consultation with companies. And then we've also been piloting and exploring a few different models in some of our country programs too. So for example, in Tanzania, we've done a feasibility study to look at an online recruitment platform that would give employers access to our pool of alumni who have kind of been vetted by us. They have experience training, have kind of proven to be to be more employable than some of their peers who haven't had that experience. And then also in Tanzania, we're working with a local fair trade coffee company to develop a training package for their young employees to provide additional training in professional behavior and etiquette, and also help identify promising talent, young talent within their company. So for this particular presentation, we're going to focus on the internship programs that we've been running in a number of our country programs for several years. This started out a lot with our former volunteers, who we then would facilitate internships for, either within Restless Development or with other NGOs, CSOs, and the public sector, at times with ministries of youth or education or national youth secretariats and organizations like that. So with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Joseph, who's going to talk about some of our programs, but also share his experience as he started out as a volunteer with us, and the kind of experience and that was transformational for him in that way, and just kind of one example of some of the other young people that have been through our programs too. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joseph.
Thank you, Jean. As a young person coming from a country that is facing huge youth unemployment, we are looking at 83% among young people aged 15 to 24, with a population of young people below 30 years standing at 78%. Young people face serious challenges, especially the young graduates who come out of universities seeking for jobs which they cannot get, trying to create employment for themselves, which is also a challenge because they don't have the resources, they don't have the skills, they don't have the support that they need. As a young person who has grown up in this kind of environment, where I graduated from university in 2010, and I couldn't get employment anywhere, because whatever application you put in, you don't even get invited for an interview because you do not have the experience that is required. However, I got an opportunity which I consider a great opportunity, which not many young people would get in my position, to volunteer with Restless Development, where I was able to lead integrated youth empowerment programs, supporting young people with civic participation, livelihoods, and sexual reproductive health, where I was able to gain key skills that are needed in the working environment. And through those skills, I was able to transition into doing an internship with Restless Development, where I was given an opportunity to discover my potential, to grow and be able to develop key skills in the development world. And from an internship, I was able to get a position as a program officer within the same organization, which is something young people like Richard could not get. Richard went to the university with me. We did the same course. We sat in the same class. But 4 years down the road, he wasn't able to get an opportunity to be able to exercise his skills. He has always had a passion for politics. But due to the issue of unemployment among young people in our country, 4 years down the road, he had to go back to his village because there was no opportunity for him, until there is this youth internship program that Restless Development is implementing now, and he was able to get on that program. And he's a case study today, because he says he has been able to discover himself, he has been able to develop key skills, and he has been able to see where he wants to go and to support other young people. So the point here, it's very important to see that we provide access to young people to be able to come up and speak for themselves and be able to take on those opportunities through the internship programs that we've been doing. We've been doing internships for some time now in the country programs that we are working in. Like in Uganda, we've been doing internships with the public sector, having our ex-volunteers doing internships with government institutions, doing internships with CSOs, and also currently we are also trying to engage the private sector, because it's a sector that is growing, especially the telecom industry, the oil industry, and tourism and hospitality, and we are trying to engage the private sector in supporting young people to be able to to access those opportunities and develop key skills. And how we do it is to ensure that we also, in the process of recruiting employers, we are looking at the needs of the employer and also the skills that the interns need to be able to bring into this organization, because there are internships in most cases where you find a young person going into an organization to do an internship and there is no work for them. They'll just make tea for the staff and photocopy papers and do stuff like that. So it's very important to ensure that in the process of recruiting the companies, you also look at the needs therein and also the skills that this intern will be able to bring. And also the internships are merit-based. The process of recruiting the interns is very transparent, ensuring that even the employer is participating in the process of recruitment to ensure that you give all young people an opportunity to be able to get into these organizations. Also very important is why young people don't get opportunities. It's because they are considered to have more of theoretical skills rather than practical skills. So it's also very important to ensure that there is serious capacity building among these young people before they are placed, ensuring that you are working on their how do you behave in a working environment? How do you conduct yourself in an office environment? How do you develop your life skills of problem solving? How do you become innovative? How do you deal with conflict in a working environment? How do you deal with other staff and things like that? And also ensuring that you put some minimum standards into these internships to ensure that you hold the interns to account for whatever they are doing, and also you agree with the employers on the minimum standards that you've put in place, and ensuring that the interns you are working with through support and supervision, mentoring and coaching are upholding the minimum standards that have been put in place. And also training them in the relevant skills needed in the workplace, because the greatest challenge why young people are not hired, it's most of them may not have the relevant skills that they need. So it's important that they also gain these skills, and also to ensure that in the process of undertaking these internships, they're also thinking of the next step. Where do you go from this internship? Are you thinking about where do you, what is your next step? And this has been very important, because when we place young people in these positions, we've had some organizations that retain them in the middle of the internship, because they can see the energy, the passion, the commitment this young person is bringing to this internship, and how serious they are, and they see them as an asset, and they are able to retain them. So it's also important to put it into the mind of this young person. It's not about the internship per se, it's about where do you move from this internship. So I'll invite Jean to come and complete the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, so we wanted to share some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the elements that we found that were keys to success. So we find in everything that we do, but also within this, that we really need to shift perceptions of young people and show them to be capable and trustworthy and not lazy. And we do this by holding up the cohort that we've developed over the years of young people who've proven that they can, without experience, without previous skills, be trained and be trusted to lead programs, and will rise to that. And an example of this is we found in Sierra Leone that without any connection to employers, that they've just found that our alumni have proved to be really good workers when they've been hired. And so they've started to put in their job ads that Restless Development former volunteers are encouraged to apply. So we try to hold that up as a standard that, with the right kind of potential and skills and training, young people, even without a lot of experience, can still contribute. Again, just to emphasize what Joseph was mentioning about the training, and so this is what Restless Development provides going into the internship, that professional expectations and work behavior are not taught in schools, and so just to not underestimate what needs to be taught in terms of the basic skills and knowledge and behavior, but also don't underestimate the young person and what they're capable of. But again, listening to employers about what are the minimum standards. So listening to employers about what the minimum standards are for their workplace, and then based on that, developing the training and holding young people to those minimum standards. And wondering if the technical training it has not been successful in getting a young person a job, maybe take a step back and say, is it because those basic professional and life skills haven't been taught and aren't there, and that's what's holding a young person back. And then again, even with employers who've been recruited to be part of the internship experience, there's still some hesitations about young people's limited experience, and so the way we've addressed that is promising additional support to be provided, very quickly if there are any issues that arise. So we'll be there to, throughout the process to support on that, and again, sharing the success stories of how young people, with limited experience can contribute to core business. We've also learned that, we all have our program cycles, your donor timetables, and this is just, not always going to align perfectly with employers' timetables for business projects and approvals, and so needing to do advanced planning on that. And providing the continuous support throughout the program, so not just during recruitment and training and placement, but in periodic support visits or communication to interns and employers, and then in doing a final evaluation and review. We found that 6 months is an ideal time period for the internships, that both employers and interns felt that interns can be better utilized and able to develop their skills. The pilot in Sierra Leone was only 3 months, and it felt like this was too short. In Uganda, it's 6 months, which is still continuing, that's seeming to be better than the shorter one. Some interns are feeling underutilized despite the kind of preparations and expectations set and the kind of role that they'd be playing going into it. And so with that, just again, more discussions are needed to agree on the kind of work, and showing success stories again. In Sierra Leone, some of the most successful internships that happened were when employers really challenged the interns, and the interns rose to the occasion, and they were some of the most successful placements for both sides with that. And then we'll just leave you with a quote from the Uganda Youth Commissioner at the kickoff to the internship program, again, about highlighting the benefits not just to young people, but also developing a network of youth-friendly companies and helping to bridge the gap between the public and private sector as well, of seeing the role for the private sector in supporting youth workforce development, the role of the public sector, and then NGOs can play too. So thank you.
Okay, last is MTC, and the PowerPoint, we do have a copy if you want afterwards, if you don't want to take notes.
I'll move that out of the way. Jill and I will be tag teaming on this one. So Jill is going to be from that mic, and I'll be from this one right here. And excuse me a second. And we're going to continue with the theme of employer involvement here, and this is primarily in the training and certifications area. So I'll have Jill give us the information on the 6 things we're going to actually cover while we're going through this program. Go ahead, Jill.
Well, today you probably heard a lot about demand-driven training, and there's many definitions of what is demand-driven, but basically what it means is, what do employers want? And are we training to those things that the employers want? And are the students coming out with those skills? And in many, many programs, those skills are never validated or verified. We do training for training's sake, and oh yeah, that kid's a welder, but we really never test can they weld to a certain level or certain quality? Well, MTC for over 30 years has been focused on demand-driven training. And we have industry advisory groups. We have all kinds of ways that we're going to share with you that we have engaged employers, because we've never thought that we ourselves could validate over 100 vocations for the level and quality that they need to be evaluated and reviewed. And we didn't want to turn out students that were doing mediocre work. So today we're just going to share a few of the ways that we engage employers with us. One is we have employers help us identify the skill sets. And in a lot of vocations, there are pages of skills that have to be learned and validated. And that's if you are going to turn out a quality employee. We also have them help us develop the curricula, the competency-based training. We help them develop the market relevancy. We validate the students' knowledge, skills, and abilities. And I'll be sharing with you ways that the employers actually help us assess all of our students that leave our programs. And then they help us establish validation and certification programs with the governments that we work with in different countries. And then they help us to inform and upgrade our curricula. Because as Marty will share with you in a little bit, it's not a matter of just doing it once and then that's the curricula for years and years to come. It's a constant upgrading based on new vocations and new ways of doing work. 3 basic ways that MTC has always engaged employers in our work is through employer forums, industry advisor groups and councils, and workforce training networks. Workforce training networks is a concept where you actually develop relationships with employers where they're contributing to the training and not just, oh yeah, we know some employers we can place the youth with once they finish the program, but it's really intense programs. I'm not gonna go into the network piece. There is a handout on the table, should be enough for everybody, and it goes into a little bit of how we develop our workforce training networks. So for that aspect, I won't go into detail. The employer forums I'll tell you a little bit about, and the industry advisory groups, we have never ran a program in the last 30 years that we didn't have some kind of industry advisory group of both community members and industry leaders that have suggested to us how we might do our programs. This particular picture is a Jordan Employer Forum that we held probably 2 or 3 months ago. And what we do is we go into a country that we are either working in or interested in working in, and we engage employers and invite them to a one-day forum. And at that forum, many employers tell us that's their opportunity to really say what they think and what they're missing in the training and how the government regulations might get in the way or what their biggest issues are. And many of them thank us for the fact that this is probably the first time they've ever been able to share with other employers in their field without it being a government meeting and the government and policymakers breathing down their throat. So the one we held in Jordan was more of an open forum with the construction sector where they could talk about what were the issues they were facing in both hiring employees and the regulations, etc. The one in Palestine that you see here was a little different. What we actually did was took skill sets that we have collected from around the world and presented them to the different employers and said, are these the skills you would need here if you were doing training? What isn't, what is? And it is interesting how there are universal skills on a lot of different jobs, but there are also specific issues that employers have in certain countries based on culture and the way that they run their operations. So this is our way to kind of introduce ourselves, but at the same time, get some good data and information on what employers are going to need in that particular country.
So what Jill had, when we get these forums together, we try to organize them in industry sectors or whatever, like the construction one we had. And sometimes there's 2 different groups or whatever, but they sort of form themselves, and then sometimes we have to try a little bit harder to get these groups to come together. But they're really important, and these forums, we establish the industry councils that will give us the information that we're looking for down the road. And they establish them a lot of times based on their employment-specific areas. Could be construction, it could be retail, it could be manufacturing, depending on where the needs are. And then also it's locally, it could be regionally, and even nationally or even globally as far as that goes. One of the first things we do in establishing these advisory councils is review and identify what are the credentials you need, what are the skill sets, and what will meet their needs. And also, this is a critical point where the TVET institutions are involved in there too as well, and ensure that their training is demand-driven, not supply-driven. And the last question, or one of the primary questions we ask is, will this, can we use an industry-recognized credential already, or do we need to develop something that really meets it locally or regionally or whatever it needs to do? So a lot of times we'll take a model and see if that will work in their program there or in that country. Also, we, at the same time, we're trying to engage these employers in supporting the competency-based training. We obtain information from these groups and industry councils, and what proficiencies do they need? What skills do the employees need to demonstrate and be able to do? And then we also verify, some of the skill sets or performance benchmarks that the employees need to have at that one point. And once we have these advisory councils established, they begin to realize, hey, we really have input, and they begin to take hold of this and be involved, and they like that, being able to voice their opinion. And a lot of times you'll notice that these opinion leaders in their community come to forefront, like in construction or in the agriculture area, and we really use those people to give us the information that we need, and then also to develop further on what in the curriculum area. We also give them lists of information from the employers and the training organizations, and get the subject matter experts or the opinion leaders to really give us the input in developing outlines in this competency-based training. The engagement factor here for the curriculum development, once we have identified the system and get the information from the industry councils, a few questions we like to ask is, do we need to develop our own curriculum? Or can we use curriculum and material that's already been developed? If we do need to develop curriculum, one of the things that we look at is using the DACA model, and that goes off three factors. It's expert workers are the people that can describe their tasks and duties, so we need those opinion leaders. Jobs are described as tasks, and successful workers perform their professions and trades. That's how they do it. And then all tasks have direct implications of the knowledge and attitude of the worker must have in order to perform their tasks. So this process sort of tailors the curriculum, and it suits it to the industry needs. And at the same time, we're developing standards and duties and task lists and assessment benchmarks and basically competency benchmarks at this point. And this also gives us a standardization point, and it leads us into the next side of the characteristics of being standardized and how to standardize this curriculum. Is it trade or task oriented are the questions that we ask these employers. Trainee performance is measured by the competency in all skill areas. We use a tiered approach to do this. We set these employers down and say, what do they need to learn first and second and third, and go from there. We make sure that once we develop this curriculum, it's taught in a consistent and uniform way so it can be portable and allowed to go transfer of skills in other areas. And we make sure it's competency-based and industry-based too as well. Go ahead, Jill.
If you are having a demand-driven system, then obviously the people that have to evaluate that are the employers, because it's based on their demands. How could anyone else evaluate that? But we do think it's important that the person that has trained or mentored or given the student additional skills be someone that can also measure how is this student doing, and not only in just the hard skills, but how will they do in the world of work and their employability. The other thing that's real important to us is to have the students evaluate themselves, because we've all had times in our lives where we thought, oh yeah, I'm an A student, and then you get a C. And you say, whoa, how did that happen? You know, so one of the things we do is, when we have it for over 100 vocations, is that we have skill sets formed into assessments. And as the student is going along, not at the end of training, but during training, we have all three of those entities assessing the student almost constantly. So the teacher will evaluate how is the student doing, are they close to learning the specific skills at the quality level to enter the workforce. We have employers through OJTs, apprenticeships, job selection process, evaluate where is this student in the level of learning that skill. And then we also have the student say, this is where I think I am. And it's an excellent evaluation process, because then you can talk to not only the employer, the teacher, and the student, but in what do we need to still do to get this person up to the level that you, employer, or the industry is looking for. And you may think, well, that sounds like that's all formal, but it also applies to the informal. Because even in the informal sector, there are certain things and criterias and expectations and cultural norms, et cetera, that are expected, and there are ways to evaluate that and say, is that person doing the best they can, even in the informal sector? So we do have the employer help us to evaluate the kids through assessment, validation on the job, assessments in the classroom, and then along with certifying the person in the vocation they're learning, like plumbing, welding, whatever it may be, we also can certify them as employable. And on all of our certificates, when a student leaves our programs, whether it be international, domestic, whatever, we put on the back of the certificate the specific skills that they have learned, so that if they migrate to another area and an employer says, well, what does this person know? There's a list that has been validated, stamped, certified, whatever the country wants to show that. This is just a couple of examples of how we do it. In Palestine, the boy that is making the rolling pin for his mother, this was an example of one of the trainers who we actually try to assign mentors if we can, and he was a mentor to this student, and it was his mom's birthday, and he wanted to make a rolling pin for her. And this is an example of how the employer can give the trainer can give input on not only, oh yeah, he made a rolling pin, but what was the quality of the rolling pin and how good was it? And then the other picture in Iraq is we actually had some trainers who were working with us on the curricula and telling us, no, this wouldn't work here, or I think you should add that, or et cetera. So that's a couple of ways we've been able to get people, either employers or trainers, to input.
So our last few slides, this goes into the, what is the certification base? And basically it's what employees need to know and be able to do, like in that rolling pin instance. And then the other group was verifying that. Go ahead, Jill, if you can finish off on slide 5 there.
Well, I think we should just talk about NCCR on the space.
Okay. One of the last things we did was the certifications, and we used a industry recognized certification, basically. Sorry. And we went to Palestine. And we thought this NCCER certification might fit in their training, and a couple of reasons there is this NCCER is internationally recognized. It's the National Center for Construction Education and Research, and there was a few organizations in the Middle Eastern area, and then in that area in particular, that also recognize that training. And it basically gives a good outline and understanding of how to deliver the curriculum, how to give the knowledge of the base knowledge for vocational instructors on how learning occurs, how to manage a classroom, how to do presentations, different learning strategies, differentiated instruction, etc. And it was pretty well received. And then also it was set up so they could propagate their training to their students, and the students could continue to do it. And hopefully it's going to continue to grow and grow in that area. I know in Saudi Arabia at the university there, they recognize the NCCER training. A lot of the oil companies like BP Amoco and Exxon and Mobil and some of those recognize that NCCER curriculum and core training, and it's also in the machine level, it's in the construction level, it's in the electrical level and the plumbing level, so it's a well-recognized certification and training that we did there.
And one of the things that's nice about this kind of training, we also have these certifications with the American Automobile Association, some of the international associations, is that we can do our programs and do our certification of an entry-level worker, but then we always have students that are interested in more. And maybe they don't have the money or the time to go to a university, but we can get them a higher level certification through an association.
So one of the primary things that we need to maintain here is the ongoing engagement and making sure that we're meeting the market needs of the employers. We're continually assessing our curriculum. We're continually assessing our programs. And this is one of the practices of sustainability I heard in the last one that we try to do and implement before we actually hand over the steering wheel of the entire program. And so we also want them to connect locally and look at the regional issues and look at it globally too as well. And this process will also bring about upgrades in skills and curriculum, any new initiatives, any new technology changes and culture changes or emerging markets. And thank you very much. We are